Formula One has been around for a long time and has acquired a massive fan base. Normally, it was made for television, where the races would be aired on Sundays whenever the season was going on, but as of recently, and due to the rising popularity of Formula One racing, F1 has recently caught the attention of a very special streaming service, that streaming service being Netflix. Netflix released a documentary in 2019 called Drive to Survive, alongside a television series where it focused on the drivers and even the behind the scenes of what goes on in these races in order to give audiences a deeper insight into what happens in the creation of these races. That being said, a lot of controversy appeared over Netflix's involvement with F1 racing, where some audiences loved it and others believed that it ruined the integrity of motorsports racing and F1 in general. Additionally, a lot of F1 drivers came out and expressed their dislike and discontent with the series that was posted, claiming that it made them look bad or over-dramatized what was actually going on, and that a lot of the things they were saying were being manipulated against them or manipulated in certain ways, and overall it just started a lot of controversy.
The problem is they will always position you in the way they want, so whatever you say, they will try to make you look reckless or trying to make you whatever fits the story of the series, right? So I never really liked that. I prefer to just have a one-on-one interview to the person who would like to know me.
Now, the drivers were easier to pinpoint as to whether they enjoyed the content or not, but the fans appear to be on a much larger spectrum, making it a bit harder to see where they lie on that spectrum, especially online. So, in order to better understand the fan perspective on the involvement of Netflix in motorsports, I conducted various interviews with several F1 fans to see what they had to say for themselves.
Hello, my name is Nicolas Rugi. So I used to watch Formula One when I was a kid, I think in 2009.
I have been an F1 fan for about 5 years now.
It's been since 2018 since I started watching religiously, and before that I used to watch occasionally because my family are a big motorsport family and they really like F1, since the days of Schumacher with Ferrari. But I actually started watching religiously in 2018.
I was 6, if I'm not mistaken. I started watching F1 when I was 6.
It's been pretty recent, so I wasn't old, maybe 17 or 18.
So I started watching when I was 11 or 12. I remember it was the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix in 2011, yeah.
I do watch them. I've watched all of them. I watched the series as well. They focus more on the drivers and behind the races, what happens behind the races, more than the race itself, which is interesting because for us, we're able to watch the races, but we don't know what happens with the drivers backstage. So I find it interesting. Personally, I find it interesting and I like it.
Yeah, so I feel like the Drive to Survive had a huge impact on F1 because they talk about it a lot. They talk about how it brought so many fans, especially US fans, because it was already a thing in Europe. It was pretty popular in Europe and stuff, but it was never really popular in the US. But since Netflix is so impactful in the US, people watched that show and they got really into it. So it created a huge kind of fan impact in the US. And that's actually changing kind of the schedule and the setup of F1 because they're creating more races in the US. Next year there's going to be a Miami race, whereas there's usually only one race in the US. Now there's going to be 2. So it Drive to Survive has a huge impact and they recognize it. And I think it's pretty representative. They do things to make the weekend seem more dramatic and interesting, to keep people interested. That's what all TV shows do. And I know that a lot of the drivers, they have negative comments about the show. Some of them really love it, some of them don't love it because they're kind of manipulated to look a certain way. And they kind of form these rivalries in the show, oh, this person and this person are competing, when the drivers are no, that's literally not true at all. So I don't know if it's factual, but it's pretty like it shows what they do.
Mm-hmm. Do you think the whole like misrepresentation of like the drivers or something, do you think that like gives Formula One a bad image, or just generally do you think Netflix did like actually help it improve? Because I heard both sides of the spectrum where people are like, no, it made Formula One look so silly, it made it look bad, where others are like, no, actually like it made it better because it got in more fans.
Yeah, I don't think it made it look bad, because like if you watch the TV show, it's really interesting and it shows like how serious it is. Like it shows like the personal aspects, the business aspects, the health and like danger aspects. Like I don't think that it really made F1 look bad. But I guess that if you only saw the TV show, you wouldn't get the whole picture. So I guess that people could like see that perspective and be like, oh, like fans are not really fans because they don't really have an idea of what's truly going on behind the scenes or whatever.
Well, as a palate cleanser, or like a kind of like a, you know, way to easily and excitingly introduce people to the world of Formula One, yeah, it does a great job on that. But you know, some can argue that like, it was very highly dramatized. A lot of like, there was like this kind of gimmick that they would kind of use that I generally don't disagree with, and I think a lot of F1 fans didn't agree with generally, was how they kind of make it seem like every single teammate hates each other, to sort of add some like drama, to make people feel like, oh, this is like a, you know, kind of like a drama show rather than an actual like just sports documentary. So it wasn't really a documentary per se, but it was just something that's like, oh, you know, hey, it's exciting, we have drama, we have icons, personalities, you know, kind of thing, rather than, you know, the sport itself.
And do you think this gives Formula One a bad image?
I don't think it gives them a bad image per se. I think it's kind of, I mean, you could look at it both ways. So it gives the people, or it gives the racers themselves a bad image. It makes it seem like they really don't care about, you know, anyone else on the track. It makes it seem like there's just this always cutthroat mentality. And obviously there is this idea of there is this idea of like, you know, this rivalry between teammates and obviously between people competing for the championship. But generally it isn't something where like, oh, everyone here, I hate everyone here, I must destroy them all, I would crash them into a wall to get to be number one, you know? So I think it gives drivers a bad image, but it gives the team, which, you know, is a good thing. At least it gives the team, or the engineers, and maybe the heads of all the different teams, a sort of like important intro into the world. You know, people generally overlook the role of engineers and stuff. So I think at least for that they do a good job. But yeah, like, you know, making drivers seem more like reality stars rather than just, you know, people out there to just, you know, play to go just race and, you know, compete for a championship. That sportsmanship, it kind of makes it feel like good sportsmanship really leads to uninteresting races, you know. So that's kind of my issue with that side of things on Drive to Survive. Yeah, I wanted to add something that's an important point to put in terms of like also something that while the Drive to Survive gave drivers a bad image, but it did good things for engineers and for team heads, I think there's an important discussion to be had on, or an important point to be made in terms of how that's fine. In terms of how we actually got the F1 sort of fan base increased dramatically, and the statistics about this don't lie. Like, Drive to Survive gave brought so many casual viewers into Formula One, and, you know, ultimately you can see this from the perspective, like, casual viewers, if they actually do enjoy the sport and if they do stick around, they'll see for themselves whether or not Drive to Survive was an accurate depiction. So it does an important thing, but it does, I think, what it seeks out to do, which is bring new people, bring new viewers, bring people introduced to the world of Formula One. But, you know, whether it does so kind of at the expense of the driver's image. So that's also like a discussion to be had on its own. So yeah.
So basically, I do not use Netflix as a platform to watch it. I watch it usually on beIN Sports or NBC Action. I heard a lot of things about Drive to Survive, mainly the good and bad things. They're like 50-50, and yeah.
In my opinion, Netflix, they didn't show the history of Formula One. I think they should focus on about Senna and Niki Lauda because they are legends, and also all the time they spoke about the fights. So I didn't like it, especially the Drive to Survive. I loved to watch the one about Michael Schumacher. Yes, so that's.
Okay, so obviously viewership skyrocketed. You can tell just by the amount of followers the drivers gained, the amount of interaction it's getting on Twitter right now. Everyone's watching F1. Celebrities are coming out and saying Drive to Survive really got them interested in the sport. And like I said, it really gave an insight for the fans into the team's dealings. All the pressure that's related to F1, everything they have to do. So in terms of viewership, it was an amazing marketing strategy by Liberty Media. And one thing which I don't want to say real F1 fans because there's no such thing as a real F1 fan, but those who really follow the sport, they can tell when the drama is being fabricated. So it's obviously fun for the occasional viewer, but some people get angry about it. I just find it funny. Like, just enjoy the show, enjoy that it's bringing more fans into the sport, and enjoy the fact that you have more people to talk about F1 about. So talk about F1 with. So yeah, in general, I like Drive to Survive. It's an entertaining show, it's an insightful show, and I really recommend it to anyone who wants to get into F1. So, and for the old F1 fans, don't be pressed about it, so.
So a lot of the feedback I got was mixed and on different aspects of the spectrum, but it was interesting to see that a lot of them had some commonalities between what they were saying. Whether they liked or disliked Netflix's documentaries and series, a lot of them agreed that it was good for Formula One racing generally because it attracted a new variety of audiences, which therefore grows the fan base and opens up more opportunities for both the new fans and the fans that were there from before. Furthermore, a lot of them admired how Netflix focused on aspects that you do not normally pay attention to when it comes to Formula One racing, and that includes management, the finances behind it, and so much more. And that just made them appreciate Formula One racing a lot more. That being said, it is important to discuss the fact that it was agreed upon that a lot of the scenarios between the drivers were exaggerated, but whether that reflects badly on Formula One as a sport, Formula One racing as a sport or not, I think that just really depends on the person watching and how they perceive the content. In the case of the fans I spoke to, it appeared that a lot of them were unaffected by this because they knew that it was over-dramatized and they did not seem to mind the fact that it was over-traumatized. But maybe Netflix's over-exaggerated documentary could leave a harmful image to newer fans, or those who just are not as caught up with the races as others, or those who do not follow the racers like the fans I spoke to. But then again, Netflix also created a larger fan base, bringing in audiences, especially in the US, that were never really interested in Formula One racing before. So I feel like that counteracts the harm that Netflix did because it did a lot more good. So at the end of the day, Netflix's involvement with Formula One racing did benefit the sport as a whole, but it could result with the damaging of the reputation of the drivers specifically, but not just the sport, but not the sport as like a whole. But then again, that would solely depend on the type of person watching the documentary and whether they're aware about Netflix's over-dramatization or not. So I feel like at the end of the day, it really depends on the person consuming the content. And it depends on how you define ruining reputation for Formula One or motorsports racing in general.